Good morning, New Yorkers. I'm your all-tea, no-sugar weather correspondent, Logan. We are experiencing a shower of poor conditions in housing with the eye of the storm here in the Bronx. We go now to our correspondent on the ground for pictures of these conditions. As you can see, Bronx apartments are in bad need of fresh coats of paint, staircase and ceiling repairs, and safer electrical outlets. Now, here's a map of rent. Now compare that to evictions. As you can see, this is a perfect storm of rent hikes. This storm has rained down on New York City's student population. In Bronx's District 9, there are more than 10,000 students living in temporary housing or shelters. In District 10, there are more than 6,000. And in District 11, there are more than 13,000. Now, let's look at the causes. First are eviction bonuses. When a landlord evicts a tenant, they can then enact permanent rent hikes for the next person to move into the unit. Next is major capital improvements. When a landlord needs to do a large fix like a new boiler or a better elevator, they can then enact permanent rent hikes on the tenants currently living there, and they can sell the units for more for the next people to rent. And last is punitive school policies. New York has spent $400 million in punitive policies in schools, but 70% of NYPD actions in schools are for non-criminal activities. There have been 2.7 million suspensions in New York City schools, and although black students make only 14% of the school population, they compose 39% of those suspended. 97% of kids handcuffed by the NYPD in schools were people of color. And lastly, we only have one guidance counselor per every 407 New York City students. Here are some statistics on arrests and summonses in school. So as you can see, bad housing plus high rent equals homelessness, which especially affects LGBTQ people. Child homelessness has increased over time, and rent-stabilized apartments have increased in cost 1.5% for one-year leases and 2.5% for two-year leases. What is this blizzard of bad housing conditions rooted in? Racism, ageism, sexism, xenophobia, and capitalism. So, we suggest, if you want to stay dry, we need to invest and divest. Counselors, not cops. Eliminate permanent rent hikes. Increase investment in restorative justice programs. Eliminate suspensions for students in grades K through 3 and limit long-term suspensions to 20 days. And pass good cause eviction legislation. That's all for the housing forecast. Now, let's pass it to the experts.
Thank you, Logan. So, I guess we'll start off with our introductions. So, my name is Brian, and...
Hi everybody, I'm Juan Nunez.
My name is Aracelis.
How's it going? My name is Emmanuel.
And we are very much aware of the issues that are happening, especially in the Bronx, regarding housing. And what really caught my attention was the statistics where it spoke that there was a high percentage of students who got arrested, and the fact that many of those students are also dealing with problems. So an example, I think, is like also talking about like the LGBTQ folks, like the fact that there's a lot of money allocated for the school to prison pipeline, and by that I mean like the metal detectors and stuff like that. There isn't enough money for guidance counselors and social workers, and so that leads us to the fact that we don't have a support system with us in school. And so I guess for the students who are coming out, it's like it becomes a challenge for them, because it's like they need to talk to someone who, one, they're really comfortable with talking to, and on top of that, it's like if they don't have an emotional support system or just a support system in general in school, they might not feel safe or not know exactly what to do, which could lead them to, like, then if their parents don't accept them, kicking them out and leading them to homelessness, and it becomes difficult for them to lift themselves up because like of the high rates of like rent, and like the difficulty it is to find like an apartment, especially at a young age when you're still studying in school and you really don't have like a job because you're focusing on school. But yeah.
I agree with the fact that it is so much stress for someone who's young and already dealing with the stress of graduating and all the drama, and a lot of times teachers don't even have time to listen because they're already dealing with so much drama as it is, and then they're just getting bounced around everywhere because the fact that they're getting kicked out with their families and they don't really have much control over that as it is. And then on top of that, you know, they can't really talk to their parents all the time because they're already dealing with so much like stress with the rent as it is. They have to try to fix that, and then if they're going to school and like the school tries to suspend them over something really small, then they get suspended, and when you get suspended, like where you're supposed to go if you don't even have a home to go to because of the fact you got evicted, which is add more stress and everything. Also, when they are in their house, because of MCIs, if the parents cannot afford the repairs, they're just living in basically a crappy situation, and they like have to deal with that. And sometimes, you know, you got like the ceiling leaking, or like maybe there's no like hot water and you need to go these things fixed, and it's like it's not their fault that the rent is so high and their parents can't afford it.
I mean, I think it's legit. You know, a lot of these students, when they go to school, some of the teachers don't know what they're really going through at home. And whatever you go through at home is going to translate into your schoolwork. So a lot of times when you, if you're facing some sort of eviction or some sort of, your apartment is falling apart and not doing the repairs, you don't want to be home.
Oh yeah.
You'd rather be outside. And when you go outside, you get into trouble, right? And that could lead to arrest because cops treat young black and brown and LGBT teenagers like adults when they see them outside.
Mm-hmm.
And that also is the same case when they go to school. They treat them the same way. They just see a person, they treat them in school like the criminal they see outside. But they don't understand that when they're in school, they don't think about all the things that they're going through at home, you know. And it's seeing the numbers about all these young folks and homeless people, it's inhumane, you know. A young person, a teenager, anybody that's in high school shouldn't have to face homelessness at all. You should be able to have a home and not deal with that stress. Because how are you going to be able to concentrate in school if you don't know where you're going to go after school?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that, you know, like housing insecurity affects every single member of the family. You know, it's not just the youth, it's the mom, it's the dad, if he's around. It's the sister, the brother, the grandmother who takes care of the kids when the mom is working, whatever it is. And it creates a situation where, you know, a lot of trauma, built-up trauma just accumulates in the household. And sometimes like the youth, you know, doesn't feel like staying home, you know, because like the mom is like stressed with paying bills because she's paying for an apartment that's deteriorating before her eyes, before the eyes of the youth, everybody, every single member in the family. And, you know, it's dehumanizing. It's very psychological. It's a type of warfare that's highly psychological, in that, you know, you're supposed to feel like you're worthless. You're supposed to feel like, you know, I shouldn't even be home. And what's crazy is that sometimes, like when people talk about like arrests, like there's like a consejo, like an advice that's like said often, oh, if you want to avoid the cops, stay home, you know. But what happens when like home isn't like a safe place? What happens when home is not like secure? The youth is not going to feel like they want to stay home,
Yeah.
you know, and then they're going to want to be out. They're going to want to be doing whatever it is just to like zone out and not be in a place that is deteriorating, where there's leaks, where there's roaches, there's rats. Those are the real life realities of housing, of living here in the Bronx. And there are many tenants who are going through that, I would say.
Years ago, I had tried to come home one day from school, and I had put my keys in the door, and the door just wouldn't open. And I stood in front of my door for about almost 6 hours waiting for my mom to come back So just to like just walk around the whole city basically looking for a place to stay. And for the next, I think it was like 2 weeks, I had gotten late to school every single day because I was not used to the transportation like I am usually from my house. So it just basically messed up the whole schedule. And then also when you're going with your parents sometimes to court because they have to deal with the eviction, that's something someone so young shouldn't be experiencing or shouldn't be exposed to when they're young, being like not knowing if when they come home can they open the keys. To this day I'm still worried every day I come home, will the keys go in the door, will I actually be able to get into my house today? And it's just something that just messes you up for like a really long time.
Fearing the fact that you might not have a home to come to brings like a lot of stress, in which like you can't focus in class and stuff, and you're just like, people may think, oh, it's not something to stress over, like you stress over that like after, but it's like you really can't, because like you feel like, do I have a home? And it like makes you feel like you failed in some way. I mean, and I say this because personally I have experienced evictions many of times, and I've had to go to like court and stuff, same way you might have also felt. And it's like, it's a stress because I would miss tons of time from school just so that I can go with my mom to court, and like she would have to fight to like get more days for her to like get our stuff out of the apartment, if not get more days for us to stay in the apartment, try to like fight off the landlord's like demands and requests. And it would start off really small, for like my mom missed the payment to like there's so much damage in the house, when in actuality there really isn't, and they're making it a big deal, and it's becoming not only stress on your mom, it's becoming stressful for you. And like as a student you shouldn't be feeling so much stress because you're supposed to be focusing on your education, if you have a job, on your job, and like other stuff. Like you're supposed to be living life to your fullest until you're 18, when you start having to worry about those stuff. And it's like at a young age you should not be feeling that way, because it's like it builds up so much anger, and then it could lead to like lashes out in class, where like people would think, oh, this person, I don't know how to control this person, let me call an SSA. And then it could lead to a court case where it's just a simple like matter of talking with someone who is just the right person you need to talk to. It could then end up you like going to a juvenile detention, or like getting a juvenile report, or anything like that, for as simple as you needing someone to talk to for support.
Wow. You know, so when it comes to housing crisis, it's something that's just vast. It's not just a few tenants complaining that their toilet is not being fixed, or it's something way bigger than that, and it needs to be addressed now, like this year.
Absolutely. I mean, I come from the line of thought that housing should be a human right. Imagine a world where you didn't have to worry about rent.
True.
You know, just think about all the trauma that would not exist. Think about like the students who would feel comfortable coming into their house to do homework, not thinking about being hurt by their parents, being hurt by their conditions, being hurt psychologically, with any sort of insecureness. Just think about all the possibilities, you know what I mean? And under the current state of affairs, there's a housing crisis. Yeah. You know, there are landlords who are abusing parents, who are abusing students, who sometimes like you have students who are helping parents pay rent, you know, because one income doesn't do it.
It's not enough.
It's not enough.
Nope.
You know, there's landlords, there's supers who take advantage of their power and they name call their tenants. You know, I in my experience, I've seen supers use racial slurs, be anti-LGBTQ, be sexist, you know, to the point of abuse, to the point of physical abuse. And, you know, this is almost, you know, uncharted turf. There is no legality. There is no sort of system in place to hold anyone accountable. People just live with that trauma. People just accept it. People accept being dehumanized as a part of life.
Yeah.
You know, and when you walk into these schools, you feel like, yeah, like I got a shitty house and my school is shitty, and like, yeah, it makes sense to have one counselor
For 400 students.
For
one,
400
one counselor to handle 400 lives.
Exactly.
400 different stories.
Exactly.
How does
man.
that person is even equipped to handle that? You
Mm-hmm.
know? And it's a shame. It's a shame.
One of the changes that are trying to be made currently is more counselors and not cops, because students need more counselors and less cops, because like I said about the issues they deal with on a daily basis and in their lives, sometimes they just need somebody to talk to, someone to be there to emotionally support them and also push them further in their education. And cops doesn't help that. All the cops do really is just interrogate you and treat you as if you're a criminal when you're not. You're just a student dealing with issues like everybody else is. And having one guidance counselor for like 500 students is not cutting it at all. Because sometimes like you can be going through something and like the guidance counselor literally be like, set an appointment. Like if you're going through something, you can't like set an appointment, just put your feelings aside for it. Like you need someone there when you're going through. That's the purpose of them. So they should be more available to other people, because at the end of the day, everybody in high school is dealing with different issue in a different way.
When I was younger, when I was in high school, I used to live in Washington Heights, well, the inward section of Washington Heights, and we lived in a one-bedroom apartment. It was falling apart. We spent from, I think it was 99 to like 2001, we spent 3 winters without heat or hot water. And then one day my mom got fed up. She decided to start a tenant association on her own. She got all the tenants together. And she was able to, we had to go to housing court. And I remember my mom going with my little brother, who was like 3 years old, by herself, taking her neighbors to housing court. She didn't speak English, but she was there organizing, and she was able to win a case. She actually was able to get them to hold the rent, to free rent for everybody for like a year, right? It was great. So 8 years before that, my mom applied for the Section 8 voucher. 2001 came, we got the letter, we got the voucher, which is huge. That meant that I'll get my own room, finally. Which is, I mean, that was huge for me. I used to sleep in the living room with roaches.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, we loved our neighborhood. That was where I grew up. All my friends were there. My junior high school was there. My middle school was there. It was like a really close community. Like we all knew each other. We all grew up together. So obviously we wanted to stay there. So we started going to building after building with our Section 8 voucher. And what happened? Nope. Due to your tenant organizing, every landlord blacklisted my mother out of every building in the neighborhood. So we ended up having to move to White Plains Road. Now, imagine going from Inwood to White Plains Road, right? I went to high school in Harlem. A 30-minute, not even 20-minute train ride from my house to my high school. Because of the landlord blacklisting us, we had to move to White Plains Road. It took me 2 hours to get to school. And then, in school, I was getting bullied by some dude that every day he saw me, he wanted to fight me. So what do you think I was going to do? You think I was going to go to school? I just literally stopped going to school. Mind you, I went from a student that was getting like A's and B's in junior high. So now high school, I was failing math, I was cutting class, and just the fact that I had to go through this, that I had to that we weren't evicted, but we were pushed into an area that we didn't want to live in just because my mom was organizing. And what that did to me personally, how I went from a straight A student to a student that never even went to school, right? And then I started hanging out in the streets. We were like, okay, we need to get out of White Plains Road. All right, so what did? We moved to another section of the Bronx that was closer to Inwood, Manhattan, so we could be with our friends and family. And we ended up living in a building that had a predatory landlord. So it was like going from, finally we got the Section 8 voucher. No, we want to go back into our community, but now we're under the same circumstances we were before we left the community. All right. So it's just, I ended up dropping out of school because of all that time that I spent, those 2 years that I spent in White Plains Road, that I just didn't want to go to school in Harlem because I was getting bullied. I ended up dropping out of school. I could have easily be turned into could have easily gone to jail, started hanging out in the streets. And I'm not that type of kid. I wasn't that type of kid that would get in trouble, turn into the so-called thug life. But you know what it is? When you're out there in the streets, you adapt. And I started spending more time outside in the streets than I was at home because they don't want to be home. I was tired of being home and things falling apart. I just didn't want to be upstairs. I'd rather be outside hanging out. It's as cold outside as it is upstairs in my room. Where do you think I'm going to be? I'm going to be outside. So I was there every day. It was one of the worst experiences of my life, man. And I can only imagine what other kids go through, what you guys had to go through, you know? And what my mom had to go through dealing with me. Because I was a handful throughout that time. I was lashing out. Stress. Because everything changed for me once we had to move 2 hours away, though. My whole mentality changed from like, yeah, I want to go to school. Now I don't never want to go to school.
Man, I really appreciate all the stories being shared because, you know, I think they give color to all of these issues that we're fighting for. So there's very, very deeply rooted things that create all of these personal experiences that we're seeing, and you know, I think that it's important for us to have an outlook of liberation, an outlook of undoing a lot of these things so that we could transform into something else. Like if we think about housing as a human right, how is that different from the current state of affairs where there is a housing crisis? What are the things in very fine detail that we have to like change, you know? You know, like I think even if we're thinking about like schools, like you know, what we like to talk about is, you know, we want counselors, not cops. That's how we think about like the situation happening in the schools. But broadly speaking, think about a world where cops aren't needed, you know, and that's the world that we have to think about creating. That's the world that we have to think about fighting for. And that's the world that landlords, the state, whether it's, you know, Trump, our mayor through his actions, many people, the police itself as an institution, many things are going to inhibit us from achieving that goal.
Yes, I also agree with that. And also, as well, housing policies have to be changed too, because it's affecting more than just the person who's paying the rent. It's affecting like a big widespread, like it's affecting like the students and the schools, because when the student, whatever the parent goes through, they go on their kids, and the kids, they go to the school and they put on the teacher, and they're like, it's just like turns into a whole big thing. So if we just like kind of kill the issue where it is, the housing policies, then it could like solve many more issues than probably know of.
So other policies that we're also trying to work on changing are policies that are affecting students in schools. And one of those policies regard like if a student says like no to a teacher, like they get suspended, and the amount of suspension days that they're given can vary between like 3 to like 180 days, and that's something we're desperately trying to change.
So yeah, like I definitely stand with those suggestions. I completely agree. And you know, I would also try to like urge us to like think like what comes next, like what's the end goal, like what do we want at the end of all of this, you know, and will that alleviate a lot of the trauma that our communities are facing? You know, will that actually lead to real transformative change in the Bronx? Because like, you know, I think ultimately like a school where like students are the ones like really having a hands-on approach in like their curriculum and like what they want to learn, what do they expect from teachers, what do they expect from the principal, what do they expect from everybody, like that's a real transformative change that I would 100% get behind as well. You know, and like in the same for housing, like what would it look like for tenants, whether you're a student, whether you're a worker, whether you're a part of the LGBTQ community, whether you're a woman, whether you're an immigrant, what would it look like for you to actually claim your home as your home, you know, and not claim your home as a place you rent.
Yeah.
You know, as what would it look like for you to actually have decision-making power over it? What would you like to see in your home? What would you like to see in your lobby? What would you like to see in your hallway? You know, this sacred ground that like you raise families in, like, you know, the fact, just having all that power to like determining like what do you like to see in it, what do you like to see coming out of it. That to me is like the end goal in a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, in order for us to get more control over our community, more ownership of our community, which is what I want to see. I want to see more people owning their apartments, owning their buildings, community land trusts, things like that. But how does that look like? What do we have to do to make sure that these sort of policies are enacted? One, we got to start pressuring elected officials that, first and foremost, we voted for them. You got to put pressure on them to make these changes. Second, I think we need to start getting more young people involved in voting and getting them to register now. I mean, they just enacted a voting reform where I think you could be as young as 16 now and register to vote. So try to get young people to be more involved in voting, how to get them to believe in the process of voting, because people don't believe that voting works at all, and I don't blame them. And then if these elected officials aren't doing what we're asking them to do, we have to start thinking about running ourselves for local offices, right? Because these are our communities. If these people aren't doing what they're supposed to do, then we have to start thinking in that way. I want to see schools now, more money pumped into the schools, you know. In my opinion, every school should be specialized. I don't understand why there's specialized high schools and non-specialized high schools. Like, you know, it doesn't make any sense.
It's classism. It's the
Right.
capitalist
Exactly.
like
You know,
way
so,
of looking at school. Yeah, man, it's
like,
crazy.
There shouldn't be that way at all. I mean, New
Yeah.
York City has the most segregated school system in the whole country. People don't really talk about that.
Right.
As far as housing, I mean, the 9 bills are a start. But we can't just rely on these 9 bills and say, that we won, it's over. No. This is just the beginning, right? This is just us chipping away. It's one chip, right? But then we have to continue to, how does that, after we enact we pass these 9 bills, okay, how else can we get more control over our community? What else do we need to do? Do we need to start thinking about opening, helping our small business owners stay in their community? So it's a lot that could be done, but it all starts with us being involved, getting involved in coalitions like the Northwest Bronx, you know, getting involved and like going, even if people I know young people don't like going to church, but even getting involved in your local church, you know, helping just be a presence in your own community, you know, that you have more control over what happens in your community than you might think. And that's kind of like what we have to get people to be proud of, say that they're from the Bronx, you know?
Word.
And honestly, I think the Bronx is the last borough where people are proud to say that they're from the Bronx. Nobody says they're from Brooklyn anymore. They're all living in Florida now. So this is our opportunity right now to really get control of the Bronx. We are the Winterfell. Fighting against the White Walkers. Right? We're the last frontier, and we need to start really enacting policies that protect our students, and protect LGBTQ community, get more people from that community, run for local office, right? I forget the name of the DA that's running in Queens.
Cabana,
right? That's a great example of what could happen in our community, getting more people to be involved. And just passing laws, passing bills that offer more protections for tenants that are renting right now. And then while keeping these tenants in their apartment buildings, show them, okay, what's the next step? You want to own this apartment, right? You want to be able to own your own place that you could pass down to your kids. So what does that look like? Okay, community land trust, things like that, you know. And then we also need to pass more, you know, that pass that minimum dollar, $15 an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not enough. This is a city where you need to at least make $30 an hour just to make it in this city. So that things like that we need to do. Some of these bills also they're getting passed are very watered down, and we need to stop doing that. A win is not a win if it doesn't really translate into actual change.
Yeah.
Right? Like people think that getting these little bills passed. No. All the 9 bills for housing need to be passed the way that we wrote them.
Right.
The people from the community, not the way these politicians want to go and tweak the changes and stuff. No. It has to go how we want it, how we design them. And if they don't pass it the way that we want them to, that's when we come in and they're gonna have to run for local office and kind of like do it ourselves. And that's the next step, I think. And that's the only way that we're gonna get control over our community. We're gonna get ownership over our community, which is what we ultimately want. You know, we want to be able to say, yeah, this is my neighborhood. I'm not going anywhere. That's my shop. That's my school. You know, and until we get to that point, we have a lot of work to do. But you know, if more people get involved, if more people cared, I think it could be done.
So I want to thank everyone who was able to make it to today's segment, and I especially want to thank Logan, who gave us that amazing report, and I want to thank you, the viewers of this video.
So, like today we discussed one of the major issues. There's many other issues to be discussed. So if you would like to see more or be part of the discussion, could subscribe, do your thing. You already know.
This was all tea, no sugar.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.